we are talking about how to plan your 2025 for the glory of God. How do we think ahead? How do we look at the coming year and plan, not just for the sake of planning, but for the ultimate purpose of how can I most glorify my Lord and Savior in this new year? And so, a couple of objectives we have for today. We're going to try to help get you some clarity on your priorities. I'll walk you through some exercises to help with that. Second, to organize some goals around those priorities. So, we're going to look ahead and try to brainstorm 3 to 5 goals for the year, and then create a schedule to help you get consistent with making progress on those goals throughout the year. So that's the objective here. We're trying to get clear, we're trying to get organized, and we're trying to get consistent. Those of you who are in our Redeeming Productivity Academy membership will know that from the new curriculum we just released. So let's start with this, a mindset shift. You've probably made goals before for the new year. You've probably set resolutions. And I want to talk about why the way we're about to approach this is different. And really, it begins with a change in the way we think about goals and the way we think about planning that is uniquely Christian, that is distinct from how the world does it. And I shared a little bit about my own story. When I was in my 20s, I was very much addicted to video games. I was sort of a lazy lump of a young man, really. And the Lord got a hold of me when I was finishing college that I needed to take this life seriously. I needed to start actually stewarding the life that He's given me, and then it wasn't my own to just waste. And as He did that, it got me into the genre of reading about personal productivity, goal setting, New Year's resolutions, all that stuff. And I've got a bookshelf over here full of every possible secular productivity book that there is, and I've read them all. And as I tried to implement those things, coming from bringing a secular perspective, I noticed that initially my goals were vague, but then they became a bit more, started talking about SMART goals, things like that. But one thing that I realized after a couple of years of doing this, implementing the world's methods of goal setting as a Christian, was that they were all self-serving. That the way that I thought about goals was really, and maybe this is how you're thinking of going into the new year. You're like, I have a health goal, or I have a financial goal, I have this. And the way that the world talks about goals, it's about me. Me, 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 me. But the distinct difference, the way we're going to talk about goals, is that we recognize that the goal of all goals is the glory of God. So for the Christian, the goal of goals is the glory of God. Goals are just a vehicle to help me increase in my faithfulness in the different domains of stewardship He's put me over. Right? So that's our chief objective, is right, the chief end of man, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And just back to my own story a little bit, the year that this really clicked for me was the year I was blessed. The Lord opened a door where a family scholarshiped me to get to go to seminary. And as I was prepping for that first year of seminary, I remember these 5 little words popped into my head as I realized I needed to take this more seriously than I had my studies in the past, in college and in my undergrad and in high school. And I remember these 5 little words popped in my head. This year is a stewardship. This year is a stewardship. And no sooner had I thought that I realized, hold on, every year has been a stewardship. See, I realized it because some people were investing in me financially to help me get this trust of an education in how to study and teach the Bible. And so I recognized, since they were paying for it, that it was a stewardship. But what I hadn't clicked to me before that is that all of it always has been a stewardship, because it's not my life. I belong to God. And that, as we are thinking about, setting our goals for the new year and really thinking about how do I best use this coming year, that's the mindset we have to have. It's a stewardship. It's a stewardship. And this is the mindset the Lord used to really transform my own life. I'm stewarding this life for God's glory. It's not about me. And all my other priorities have to line up behind this ultimate objective of bringing God glory in my life. That's what stewarding it well looks like. And it was the same mindset the Lord used to enable me to go from a failing student to graduating summa cum laude with my seminary degree. It was the mindset the Lord used to help me land my dream job, working for a wonderful ministry I worked for years. And it's the same mindset the Lord's used in my own life to enable me to turn redeeming productivity from just a random little blog into something that reaches thousands of believers. I've gotten to write books. I get to support my family doing this. And I'm not saying that to brag or to say that I'm special. The whole point in sharing that is to say, I'm just some random loser who the Lord impressed on me, finally got through my head this truth that it's not my life, it's a stewardship. And the second I started taking that seriously and then applying myself to actually intentionally approach life, that's when things started to click. And it, obviously not everything is going to work out the way that you plan. We're going to talk about that. We hold our plans with an open hand, but it has to begin with this mindset. As you go into 2025, here's what you need to just write this on your forehead. 2025 is a stewardship. It is not your life. It is not your year. It is God's, because if you're a Christian, you were bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ, and you are not your own. And so if we can bring that attitude into how we plan for the new year, it changes everything. Because then you start to ask, okay, if I'm a steward, if this year's a stewardship, what is required of stewards? What does the Bible say that is required of a steward? Well, it actually tells us directly, 1 Corinthians 4:2. And this is the Apostle Paul. He says, now it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. So faithfulness is the objective. As you approach any goal, as you approach the new year, you approach, how am I going to plan this out? I want to be found faithful. I want to be standing here or sitting here at the end of the year, December 2025, and look back and say, I was faithful with the year. I treated wisely and well the things the Lord entrusted to me, my finances, my relationships, all these different areas, my walk with the Lord. All of these things, I was more faithful this year than I was the year before. But that doesn't happen by accident, right? No one stumbles into faithfulness. It requires grace. Yes, is the Lord working in us both to will and to work for his good pleasure. But it also requires us to, as we're empowered by God, to be diligent in pursuing faithfulness in all areas of life. And so if you're familiar at all with the stuff I do, if you've read my book or taken any of our courses or read any of my articles, I often reference these domains of stewardship. And this is the idea that you have different areas of your life that you're called to be faithful in, right? And each of these are places that in different seasons of life, we're being varying degrees of faithful in, right? Different times of life, we're kind of like, I'm doing well, not doing so well there. I'm living up to what God's called me to do. I'm not living up to what God's called me to do. And the reason this is helpful is that it gives you a way to systematically approach trying to improve and grow in faithfulness in all these things the Lord's entrusted to you. So we're going to put this to work today as we think about the new year. But just a reminder, I already said this, but faithfulness doesn't happen by accident. And so what I want to encourage you with, and if you walk away with nothing else from this, I want you to plan for faithfulness in 2025. Plan for it. Don't leave it up to chance. Don't let this be another year that just slips by where you're kind of like, wow, where did the year go? I just kind of was carried along by the tyranny of the urgent. I was just responsive. I wasn't proactive about anything. And I'm in the same place I was last year. Let this be a year where you plan for the faithfulness that you want to see and the growth you want to see. So a couple principles that I want you to have as we go into the actual practical part of this. So principles of Christian planning: don't not plan. That is a double negative. I know that. And what I mean is do plan. Wisdom requires planning. It is not unchristian to plan, right? Even in the wisdom literature, very often wisdom and planning are treated as virtually synonymous, right? Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. I observe the ant because she plans ahead for the season where she won't have grain, right? The sluggard, the lazy person in the Proverbs, much of their issue is that they're not planning ahead. They only think about today. And that's why they're gluttonous. That's why they're lazy. They're just thinking about the pleasures and the comforts of today where they don't plan ahead. Wisdom is planning, and we're called to do it. But at the same time, don't plan arrogantly. This is where the warning comes in. James talks about this in chapter 4. Come now, you who say, tomorrow we'll go to this and such a place and make trade and make profit there. And James chastises them, and he says, no, Like, you shouldn't talk that way. You're boasting and it's arrogant, and that boasting is evil. Instead, he says, you ought to say, if the Lord wills. So, whatever plans we make here, whatever you come away with in terms of goals from our time together, recognize you got to hold those with an open hand. The Lord is the one in charge of everything, and I prefer his plans to my own anyway, right? But that doesn't mean you don't plan. You still plan, but you just be prepared that he may redirect you, and we invite that. A third, just negative thing on principles for Christian planning: don't plan unrealistically, right? Don't do something crazy. Don't make goals that you know you have no possibility of ever reaching this year. If you have a big huge thing like that, that's more of an aspiration. Think, as I mentioned before, 5 years into the future, maybe I can work towards that. But be realistic, stretch yourself, but not so much that it's just something that's completely impossible. Positively, do plan for holiness. Make sure as you're planning for this new year that part of your thought patterns, part of what you're pursuing in 2025 is growing in grace, right? Walking closely with the Lord. When we talk about those domains of stewardship, all of those, the center of that little donut I showed you earlier is the spiritual life, your walk with the Lord. Everything flows from that, right? He's the true vine. If you're not walking closely with Christ, you're not going to be faithful in any area of life. Do plan for relationships. Be intentional, right? Might mean having goals around your relationship with your spouse or your kids or friends or church involvement, but make sure you're not just thinking. A lot of times we get to New Year's and we're only thinking, okay, I have a health goal or a financial goal, like or a career goal. We slip into only focusing on certain categories. Make sure you're thinking broader than that. But above all, do plan for growth. It is good to be growing. Living things grow. Do plan to be growing in faithfulness in every area that the Lord's entrusted to you. Because remember, 2025 is a stewardship. Okay. So if we're going to do this right, we need clear God-honoring priorities, we need organized goals with a plan of action, and we need consistent effort on those goals. That's the three elements that I want to help you with now. We're going to go through the three phases. We're going to talk get clear. So first step, we got to know what we're aiming at. We got to have some vision, some idea of what the end state is that we're setting goals to reach. And this actually begins not by looking forward, but by looking back. So what I would ask you to do is, whether you do that in the planner or you just do it on a piece of paper or in a note-taking app on your computer or whatever, what you're going to want to do is go through these 7 domains of stewardship and do a few things. Rate your faithfulness in the last year from 1 to 5. Okay. And this is not beat yourself up time. This is really you just trying to be honest. How faithful was I in this area? Was I consistent, like with my walk with the Lord, for example? Was I in the Word daily, right? So this is going to be personal. This is something just for you, but you fill that out, and you rate it 1 to 5. And for those of you, if you've ever done our Well Done webinar, or if you are in our academy and you've written a well done statement, that's what you're comparing this to. You're saying this 1 out of 5 is compared to what I described what faithfulness would look like in the spiritual domain when I die and go to meet the Lord. That's the idea. You're sort of measuring the gap between that. And then what did I do in this area? So there's a space in there, which is basically like, what actions did you take? Right? Did I follow Bible reading plan this year? Was I praying daily for the spiritual one? Right? And then you ask, what went well? So celebrate the wins. And by celebrate, I mean give thanks, because again, it's the Lord who's working in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. If you've seen improvement in some of these areas, write it down and have that be a chance to say, thank you, Lord. Thank you for what you're doing in my life. It's also good encouragement to see that, like, hey, stuff is happening. Sometimes if you don't pause to reflect, you don't recognize that the Lord is changing you little by little. You're being progressively sanctified and you're growing, but sometimes it's imperceptible until you stop and actually look back at it. And then finally, what can I improve? And I'm going to come back to this one in just a moment. This is probably the most important part when we think about how we're looking ahead to the next year. But I wanted to spend a moment just going around the domains of stewardship thing, just to explain each of them to you. If you're not familiar with our system, how we talk about these, I wanted to make them clear to you. So The spiritual one, right? That's right in the middle because as I said, everything flows from that. He's the true vine, you're the branches. If you abide in him, you will bear much fruit. If you want to bear fruit for Christ in a way that you're being faithful, you're living as a redeemed creature in every area of life, you got to be walking with him. So start with this one. If you need to be growing, we always need to be growing in this, but if you don't have consistent habits or things in place for growing spiritually, get that one rectified first. So that's the stewardship of your soul, the spiritual. The physical, this is your body, right? Your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. Are you exercising? Are you eating well? Are you um, dealing with, medical issues as they come up, or are you letting yourself atrophy? This is a stewardship too. Your body is not your own. So make sure you're taking care of that. You might have goals that correspond to that one. Stewardship of your mind, the intellectual domain, right? Are you just, uh, subsisting on TikTok brain rot, or are you feeding your mind? Are you pursuing wisdom? Are you loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, right? So you might have intellectual goals. Maybe it's a reading goal, maybe things like that. How did you do in that area? What do you want to pursue? Rest is another one, or I call it recreation because it's not just rest, like are you sleeping enough or resting enough, but also leisure. What are you doing with your free time? How are you enjoying the good things God has made for you? You got to make sure we're stewarding that as well. In the relational category, stewardship of your heart, right? This is the second greatest commandment. Love the Lord or love your neighbor as yourself. That uh, so often we just aren't intentional about that. We don't have some plan for how can I be more involved with my local church? How do I reach out to my neighbors? How do I love my wife or my husband better? How do I serve my kids? How do I do this with my friends or my family? Like you can set goals around that. How are you doing in that area? What went well this last year? How can we improve? Stewardship of your work. So there's a vocational category, right? So this is not just work. Maybe you're retired. What's the main thing that you do? What's the calling God has for you? The main occupation He has for you right now in this season? Or if you're a full-time homemaker, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a job in the traditional sense, but just vocation just means what's God called you to do. Um, because we have to make sure we're studying that well as well. Finally, last category is economical. And I just call this the stewardship of your household because not just money, it's your stuff too, right? How are you taking care of what the Lord's given you? Are you honoring Him with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your produce? Are you giving financially? But also, are you taking care of your money? Are you investing wisely? Are you kind of sitting on your wealth, or are you not taking the actions you know you need to be taking to be able to take care of your family more or to be able to give more, right? So that's an area too where all these things are stewardships. And so all seven of those, I just offer that. I'm not going to suggest, actually, I'm going to warn you against this. Don't try to set big goals in all seven of these. You'll die. Well, you might not die, but you're going to be exhausted. In 1 year, you're not going to go from 0 to 5 in every one of these areas. That's fine. But what we're trying to do now is try to be strategic. Okay, which ones need the most work? And can I focus on those with a goal this year? And so that's where I mentioned on your workbook, this last question, what can I improve, is really important because I want you to brainstorm here. What are the things I can do different in 2025 that will help me to be a more faithful steward of my spiritual domain, of my relational domain, right? There's a page for each one of those in your workbook. And I want you to spend some time with this because that is actually what we're going to use in the second part to set goals based on. Think of this as your area to brainstorm potential goals in each of these areas. And then you're able to choose from among those. Now we want to get organized. So if you think about this first step, this get clear, we're dreaming a little bit. We're thinking, what are all the things I could do? What are the priorities in these seven areas? And you kind of have some idea based on the way that you're ranking things, right? When you're saying I'm a 2 out of 5 in this area, but all the other ones I'm a 3 or a 4, that gives you some indication that, hey, maybe I should work on the domain of stewardship that I'm really not doing well in. If you're a 2 on the spiritual domain, that might be a good one to say, okay, let me look at some of these options for goals, and I'm going to pursue one of these first in the new year. That's the clarity aspect. That's what we're trying to do with that first part. So now we want to choose some goals. What I would recommend here is that you pick 3 to 5 potential goals for the new year. And the easiest way to do this is go back through that sheet that you had, those 7 sheets about each of the domains. And in the what can I improve section, circle, 3 to 5, not in each one, but total. So you might, some of the domains you might not circle any goals for, right? That's good. You shouldn't have 7 goals. I think that's too many. But try to find 3 to 5 that you're like, man, if I could just get these ones uh, done, that it would be an insanely productive year. I that'd be an amazing level of growth. Um, and then you're going to write down on this piece of paper. There's a section for, I think I have 5 of these for you on the those 2 pages. Is you write down which domain they fit in, and then you write the date you'd like to complete them by. So there's a little spot there. It might be hard to read, but you write the name there. What is the name of the goal? Okay, let's say we're choosing a goal in the spiritual domain. Okay, by the end of the next year, I want to have this goal done. So you would look around and again, you're thinking in terms of these 7 areas. Which domain does it fit into? And then you're going to put a date next to it. So and you don't have to hold yourself to these. This is still sort of brainstorming, but you're saying, okay, when could I finish this one? This one's like an all year goal potentially. You're trying to do daily devotions for the year, but you could just say this is a quarterly goal. I want to do this by the end of March. I want to get to a place where I'm reading the Bible daily. That's a good way to do it. And then you're going to write what we call a definition of done for the goal. What is this? It's just a more clarified version of the goal. What can happen is if you just write the name of a goal, you tend to keep it kind of vague, right? It's not super specific. What does daily devotions mean? Did I mean 7 days a week or 5 days a week? Did I mean 1 chapter or 10 chapters? Did I mean praying for 1 second or for 10 minutes, right? The definition of done forces you to really, really clarify what that's going to look like in the past tense. And so that's why I think it's really wise to write them in the past tense. This isn't manifestation or something. I just did a podcast on that recently. This is just because writing it in the past tense forces you to be really clear. So you picture, okay, if I'm at the end, this goal is done. What does that actually look like? Maybe for this one, it'd be I read at least 1 chapter of the Bible and I spent 10 plus minutes in prayer at least 5 days per week. That's a pretty clear thing, right? See how we brought clarity to it? And already you have a sense of how you can measure this goal. A lot of that stuff becomes clear when you write a definition of done. So here's some other examples of definitions of done for different goals. My wife's name is Kim. That second one, the Kim and I had a date night at least once a month. Maybe that's a relational goal, I'm thinking backwards to it. Okay, how would I define if I did well in this thing? If it was once a month, we bought a house. Maybe you have an economical goal like that. Recreational. I took time off of work at least once every 2 months. Right? Maybe you're like I know I work too much. I need to take some time off. I need to rest a little more. Maybe that's a good objective. I currently have X amount of clients. Maybe you have a business and you're saying, I want to increase sales. This is a vocational thing. Can I challenge myself to be more faithful in this? Okay. Maybe it's a number. I took a walk or exercise 3 times per week. It's a physical goal. And you can get help with all of these. There's so many different ways to do that. And I'll talk about the academy in a little bit, but there's folks, even I know Kari does like health and nutrition coaching. She's on the call here too. So you can get help on some of these, but defining what it is you're actually trying to achieve in the end state, that's a great place to start. Okay. Last section, how this goal glorifies God. This is so critical. And this is something that I think often we leave off when we approach goals, not in a Christian way. We want to be specific about how this goal glorifies God. If that's the objective, is that I want to glorify God more this year, then I need to actually define how that works. So in this example, the spiritual one's probably the easiest one. So this is sort of cheating, but how does this goal glorify God? Well, it deepens my relationship with him and it familiarizes me with his word. That's good. But let me go a little deeper on this. Why this glorifies God thing is so important and how it can apply to any goal, not even just a spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual goal. And it relies on one, like obviously you want your goals to be glorifying to God if that's your chief objective. But there's actually even a practical consideration here too. And and it comes from this idea of what I call the motivation equation, that you have different reasons for doing a goal. And the stronger and more compelling the reason you have, the more likely you are to actually follow through. And so I call this the motivational equation. And it basically it says this: motivation equals reason times plan minus pain. Right? Another way I like to say it is that why times how minus ow, right? Is what what is the big reason, the why? Can I multiply that times having a good plan? And then is that greater than the amount of pain that it takes me and discomfort it takes me to actually reach that goal? That's how motivation works out. And so you might say something like, I'm going to accomplish X, X being your goal, because of reason, by doing plan, in spite of pain. That's sort of how we think about it. So let me give you an example with maybe a goal from a physical domain. Maybe you'd say, hey, I have a goal of running a marathon this year. And what we might do traditionally, if we're not thinking about like this like Christians, is we might say, I want to run a marathon. That's the goal. Because I want to prove that I can. That's the reason. And I'm going to do it by following Caleb's training plan. I don't know who Caleb is. I just made that up. But say you have a good plan. And I'm going to do it in spite of the pain, how hard inconvenient training is going to be. Okay, that's a well-written goal. And it has a good plan, and it's clear on what the pain that you have to overcome to do it is. But the motivation, the reason is really weak here, because I'm going to prove that I can. And often we don't think, why am I doing this? But it's a wonderful byproduct of God glorifying goals is that always have a stronger reason, because it's not just about me, it's about him. And so even as you change this, let's swap it out. Let's say that the reason is because training will force me to steward my body. So I'm running this marathon just because it's a forcing function. It's a deadline that's going to allow me to get into shape that I need to get in. That's why I'm doing it. And I'm recognizing it's a stewardship. I'm glorifying God by taking better care of my body. And the clearer you are on how the goal glorifies God, the stronger the reason is, which means the more likely you'll stay motivated to complete that goal. So it's one thing to be clear on your priorities. It's another thing to have some plan for a goal and some sense of, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on first. But now you have to turn and say, what am I actually going to do to make effort or make progress on this? And that's the get consistent part. That is the get consistent part, is I want to keep going. I want to not just have this be, I know we've all had the experience where I have a New Year's resolution and it's just gone 2 weeks into January and you're like, yeah, I didn't even start it. That's not helpful. We need some idea of how can I get consistent? What can I do to make sure I'm putting in the daily or at least weekly effort to progress on this goal? So I think one of the big things, we've talked before about like what habits do I do? And I think there's a lot of value in that. We talk about sometimes an implementation intention. I've talked about in the previous years where you say basically, where am I going to do this? When am I going to do this? And what am I going to do? That's a good formulation for a habit. That's called an implementation intention. But no matter what, it seems that if you can schedule what I call time on goal, you are most likely to be able to do what you want to do. You might not get all the way there, but a lot of it is just a game of time management, of how can I make sure I'm spending time on this each week? And the best way to do that is to schedule for it, right? So what I'm going to recommend here is we've picked at this point, after you do the exercises in your workbook, you'll have 3 to 5 goals for the year. What you're going to do is just take the first one you want to do, and say, okay, let's make a plan for how I can consistently work on this goal. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to open up my calendar and I'm going to plan and block out time when I'm going to do this each week. And you say, well, duh. But can I tell you guys something? One of the things I found, even this year, I've found it to be true again and again. There are so many very obvious things when it comes to productivity and time management that you're like, oh yeah, I've read that 1,000 times. But then I turn around and say, but have I ever done it? And so some of this advice, you're like, yeah, this is obvious. My encouragement to you is do it then. If it's obvious, do it. If you know the right thing to do, then do it. And so if you want to be consistent, you got to plan ahead and block out the time so that that doesn't get eaten up by other stuff. Make an appointment with yourself. And there's a couple ways to do this depending on the type of goal that you have. So imagine this is an abstract view of a calendar, right? And you have time blocks throughout the day. And so these are different appointments and things like that. One version of this is maybe you have a project-based goal. Maybe there's some big thing you want to do, like a writing project or a vocational goal. You're trying to complete some career certification, something like that. And what this goal is more about putting big chunks of time on it than it is about doing little chunks each day. And so for those, schedule some blocks into your calendar. Do them now before your calendar fills up in January and say, okay, only once a week. I only need to do this on Wednesday. I want to spend 2 hours on this thing. And that's the time I'm gonna block that out. I'm gonna not take appointments during that time. 2 hour block on that. You say, well, I can't manage 2 hours, but can you do 1 hour twice a week? And vary that based on the type of goal it is. But that's one way to approach it is block out a couple big chunks for project-based goals. Some goals are habit-based though, right? Exercise goals are the classic example, right? For a habit-based goal, smaller 30-minute, hour, whatever it is, however long it takes for your habit, those chunks of time, multiple days a week, that's better than these big deep work blocks. But again, the same thing is true. Schedule it, put it on the calendar. That's really the key here. You've got to keep it very simple. And then what you want to do is track it, okay? And this is really, really helpful. You've probably heard this before too, but do you do this? Track your progress and review your goal very regularly. So a couple of things. Keep track of how much time on goal you've had. We've been doing this in the academy. I think we just did it the first time this last quarter. I think it was Q4 this first time we did it. But we call them strokes. And it's probably a terrible name because it sounds like the medical issue stroke. No, I'm thinking like swimming, right? How many strokes are you putting in each week? And we have this little stroke tracker that we use in the academy for our quarterly goals, where basically one stroke equals 30 minutes on goal. And what's cool about this is it works no matter what your goal is. If it's the type of project-based goal where you're putting in 3 hours a week, well, okay, then that's 6 half-hour chunks, so that's 6 strokes. So you would say on Wednesday I did 6 strokes, right? But it works for habit-based goals too. You're saying I just want to work out a half hour each day, or I want to be in the Word and praying 30 minutes each day. Well, that's 1 stroke, 5 or 7 days a week, right? And so it sort of normalizes, gives you a numerical way to represent any goal and to track your progress throughout it. And so you can take for 13 weeks and just track it. And, I don't think I actually have this in your workbook for you right now, but this is a very simple diagram, obviously. It's just the days of the week with numbers, and you're just writing down how often I do it. And the trick is don't just track it, but then, this is another scheduling thing, make time to review it and look back. Again, some of this just involves getting on a calendar. Set a monthly appointment in yourself to reread your goal statement, review how it's going, and make any necessary adjustments. Here's where I wanted to circle back to the motivation thing. Actually do this. You say, I know what my goal statement was. I know what my goal is. I still do this. Weekly is even better, but still at least once a month, reread the whole thing, especially guys, especially the part on how this goal glorifies God. That's the part that renews your motivation. That's the part that will remind you, oh yeah, this isn't just about me. This isn't, I set some fitness goal and I've kind of, in the last month or two, I've started to think about, well, I don't know if I even care about this anymore because I don't know that I want to be fit. Then you go back to it and read it and you say, oh, I forgot. This wasn't about what I wanted. This was about being a faithful steward. That forced reminder, I'm telling you, that's the thing that snaps you out of that malaise where you're like, oh yeah. This is about him, not me. And then finally, for the get consistent part, and some of you already mentioned this, get accountability. Like, don't do this alone. Don't do it alone. Right? This is, Christ set up his church on earth for a reason. We have a fellowship of believers throughout the world. And hopefully you're involved in a local church. You have people there. Maybe you have a believing spouse or friends that are believers. Get accountability on your goals with other people, right? Share your goals with somebody. Ask them, do you have any goals? Let's do this together. And update each other on progress, right? Have some standing check-in thing. Hold each other accountable. And there's a bunch of ways you can do this. This I mentioned you can be a spouse, maybe you have a mentor you meet with, a friend, or someone disciples you, or who you disciple. That's a great thing to do. Even if you're mentoring someone else or discipling them, you say, "Hey, I need your help too." It's an awesome way to build a bond. A small group is a neat thing to do with a small group through church, or an online community. And that's one of the things that we've tried to build here with Redeeming Productivity Academy is like, hey, here's a play. You're like, I can't find anybody who's interested in this kind of stuff. Well, we've got a big group of people. We got 250 plus believers who are interested in this kind of stuff with our membership. And that's why we made it, because we help each other stay accountable. So it really, that accountability part is where I've seen the gap. Even in the, you hear me say, oh, find accountability. You're like, my spouse doesn't want to do that with me. I don't know anyone I want to do it with. Well, we do have a whole group of people that are trying to do this together. And that's where I think we can be helpful to you. Redeeming Productivity Academy is our membership program. It's got a course and a community and a bunch of other stuff. But the goal there is just like we talked about here. We want to help you get clear, organized, and consistent so that you're glorifying God in all areas of life. And we recognize this is a lifelong journey. This isn't something you're going to do in 1 year or 1 quarter. And so that's why we've set it up this way. We created a community of people doing this together. And there's a bunch of stuff. We got 250 plus productivity-minded Christians in there. So this is your tribe if you're looking for a group of people who are trying to do this. One of the big things we do, I've alluded to, is these quarterly goal challenges. And so we actually have one coming up on for Q1. So the first 3 months of 2025, we're going to be setting that 2 Fridays from now. A little workshop that's going to go deeper on some of this, where you're taking that goal you just came up with for the first quarter and actually really granularly setting out a plan. And then we have these habit check-ins or goal check-ins every week. And we have this little, like I mentioned, that public scoreboard. So if you want to, nobody has to do this, but you can actually share your strokes with people and everyone sees it. And so you kind of have that sense of, okay, I need to do this. So it's not all zeros. So a little bit of that accountability factor. And there's discussion questions, things like that each week. And then we also have that strokes tracker thing, which I will share with you guys. Normally we just share that in the academy for people who do the quarterly goals thing, but I'll give it to all of you just so you can use it even if you don't join. The big thing is, and this is kind of like the big announcement thing I'm most excited about, and hopefully Academy members will tell you if you've started, we just released a brand new 9-week comprehensive Christian productivity curriculum. I don't even know that there's anything else out there like that. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I redid all the coursework. I've been working on the Academy for over 3 years now. I've been writing on this subject for almost 10 years. I've written several books on it. And my thinking has changed and evolved from working with people on this. And I turned this into a 9-week curriculum that does a bunch of stuff. It's called Waypoints to Well Done. And right now it's only available for people who are in the Academy. And over the course of 9 weeks, you do a bunch of really cool stuff. So the waypoints, as we call them, are these different like milestones, right? So we have the different phases: get clear, get organized, get consistent. So in the get clear thing, we're trying to help you get clear on your calling. So I mentioned a well done statement earlier. How do you defining what faithfulness looks like in the long term for my life? We give you a lot of resources how to do that, some exercises to do to really crystallize that. Have a Christ honoring purpose statement for your life. Defining aspirations over the next 5 years. This is a thing that's totally changed my life, to be honest. I'm at the end of my 5-year aspiration thing right now. And by God's grace, I've hit almost all of them. And so I have a whole new unit just on that because it's so transformative. And then the get organized phase, we help you with goal setting. So some of what we've done here, but much deeper, give you this repeatable system you can use over and over again to make progress. Help you set up a commitment tracking system, right? How do I make sure stuff doesn't slip through the cracks, that I'm doing what I said I'm going to do, right? Maybe you've got sticky notes in 5 places using 3 different apps. We help you have a system and a process for keeping track of all that so you can be a person of your word whose yes is yes and no is no. And then the get consistent thing, it actually starts from the very beginning. We help you build these 5, we call them power habits. If you've read my book, you read about power mornings. What we decided to do is from the beginning, from week 1 through week 9, you're slowly building these up. So we're giving you very simple things to do in terms of Bible reading and prayer. And then you increase the frequency. You start to add things like exercise or organizing for the day or reading, and you can build these up. And so at the end of the 9 weeks, you go from very simple, I'm just doing something 2 days a week, to I'm doing these 5 habits 5 days a week. And that slow progression, I think, is the key to helping you actually make those habits for life. We help you develop a weekly schedule, practice daily disciplines. That's That's the whole deal, trying to do all of that. I'll show you that this is probably, you can't even read all this, but this is the course schedule of the 9 weeks. You're developing habits each week. There's different lessons, etc. Brand new workbook comes with that if you join the academy. It's huge. It's like 100 pages and it is beautiful. It's massive. There's stuff for every single part of this, tracking the commitments, all of that. That's included. We also, if you guys have heard of the Christian Productivity Planner, there's our Notion workspace. That's included free. It's normally 59 bucks. Everybody in the academy gets it. And we also have a new bonus. That's the Waypoints Goal Planner. So we tried to make a paper version of these principles for people as a planner, and it's a 13-week goal planner. It's right now it's only going to be available for like to use on a tablet. So if you write with an Apple Pencil or a I don't know, Remarkable tablet, but we're shooting for in Q1. So in the next few months to have it so you can order those if you want, and members get them at a discount. Has stuff for everything there. So all of that is available in the Redeem Productivity Academy. And here's the big thing, the big sort of, I guess, special offer. I've never done this before, but I'm doing a free trial of it. So it's $35 a month to be in the academy, or $350 a year, which I don't know how the math works out, but basically you get 2 months free because the effective monthly rate is lower if you do yearly. But no matter what plan you choose, you can try it for 7 days free. You can get in, you can do the first week of the new curriculum. You can meet the community. You can come to any of the events we have. I think we have an office hours next week, which is just like me and whoever else wants to get on the call and we talk about stuff. But I would just encourage you, try it out. 7 days, try it for a week, see if you think it's useful. I think this could be the key for a lot of you to help sort of just have someone hold you by the hand, have a group of people working with you to really make those changes you want to make in the new year. And I'd love to be a part of that if you want to join us. And we have a 30-day money back guarantee. Even if you stay past the trial and you're like, I stayed for a month, but I still wasn't happy. I don't care. I'm not trying to take your money. I'm happy to give it back. But we made this hopefully affordable. We made this in a way that really, I think, can help you. So that's my pitch. Do check it out. redeemingproductivity.com/academy. Join today, start that 7-day trial, try the course, get the new stuff. And we want to help you. Thank you guys for being here. And you can always email me if you get my newsletter or even the invite to this. That's just my email address. You can reply to that. It's just Reagan, Reagan, at redeemingproductivity.com. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Please reach out.